All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, Fran and then Fran from Ferris, right?
Yeah.
Is going to talk about accessibility and please correct me if I'm wrong, more in the area of like acquisitions and licensing and stuff like that. And then Jeff Sykes from Grand Valley's Disability Support Resources Office is going to talk a little bit about the tools that he would use to mitigate some accessibility issues that students might encounter. So Fran, I'll let you go ahead, and thank you both for presenting today.
Okay, well, listen, so from like kind of the business point of view, right? It's not the question of accessibility, it's the question of appearance of accessibility, or that what we're I don't mean that exactly. I'm really looking forward to the part that Jeff talks about in terms of some of the things that people can do. So we all know that just more and more recently with electronic resources, we've had to deal with questions, including legal questions of whether libraries, whether the university is providing access to all of our students. And Ferris was, everybody else might have been as well, but Ferris, had some suits against it for not providing accessible content and all. And I was just kind of going to run through it a little. I was gonna, okay, sorry, like I said. I was thinking about this because our colleagues in the teaching, who are regularly teaching classes are just have gotten really super good at Zoom, and I feel like I'm definitely tailing behind. So, there's section 508. A lot of stuff comes back to section 508 of the EPA administers of the Rehabilitation Act as amended by the Workforce Investment Act, et cetera, which basically says that, I'm sorry, we'll try. No, I'm showing the other thing. All right. I did this to Deja. We did this great presentation and I kind of got lost in Zoom for a minute there. Okay, so section 508 talks about that we're required to make things available, everything equally available to our students. And of course, it's not just a legal requirement, it's a moral and ethical requirement that if we're providing content and spending money on it, that everybody be able to use it. There's been a lot of developments over the last few years. That thing that I did bring up was the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines from the World Wide Web Consortium that gives a great deal of information about how to determine if your content is accessible. And the thing that we do when we're acquiring content, and it was kind of interesting because I was looking around at what people say, and because some of our libraries I looked at our library like Ferris, and we have this accessibility statement that's like this long and basically says we'll make stuff accessible. And of course, other libraries have more elaborate and okay, so I think I can find that one again. For example, if you look at Michigan State's webpage, they have a great they have this great webpage, and I don't know, they have they have a library accessibility statement, and they have, and I've seen this in other places, I don't know if other folks here have, specifically like a statement about, how do we decide what to purchase, something like actually written rather than just kind of some guidelines. And so that's one of the things that different libraries might do, would be to just set up, okay, here's our policy, here's our procedure. Some libraries, I know Michigan State, as I remember, like, they run everything through their legal office based on, for accessibility accommodation, that to meet that. Others of us are, we had a meeting, at Ferris, we had just about a year ago, just after the lockdown, I think, they hired somebody new in purchasing who decided that, they were going to recreate the wheel about library purchases. And one of the questions that came up was VPATs, was whether we're doing anything for accessibility, to confirm that. So generally, if we're doing acquisitions, we're asking for a VPAT, and a VPAT doesn't say it's accessible, it just provides information about how we can find out whether it's accessible, right? So it has the contact people, and the VPAT might say there's some problems, but at least they're documenting them and providing a way for us to access them. And so when we're purchasing library resources, we can't really just say, oh, we're not going to buy it, it's not accessible usually. I mean, you're right, that might save us money. But generally, that's the kidding. So the question is, like, for a library would be to have an accessibility statement and to have information about how that statement is being carried out. There are some different options. One of the things is that you can go to did that work? Do you still see the Michigan State screen, or did it switch?
We see the like a managed license term screen.
Okay, great, super. All right, I'm going to go back there now, but I just wasn't sure. I'm sorry, like I said, with Zoom, sometimes it's so what I was going to do is talk a little bit about, how do we know whether we can buy something? And generally, the vendors are working with, they'll provide a VPAT. The big, Michigan State, a lot of what they're getting, they point to this. Anybody can say it, like the big 1G is doing this work with accessibility resource testing, where they're paying this third party, which DQ, does anybody know? They seem to be the big movers in this area. But so they're paying that company to do the evaluation and kind of certify whether things are accessible or not, or how accessible that they are. And this was actually, I'm not again, but they've actually, I haven't looked at this in a year or two, so there's this really long list of reports of a lot of the resources that we do subscribe to. And with some of them, there's responses about what they're doing or not doing in response. So this is one thing that we can provide if people want more information, more detailed information about what's accessible. And they also have, I'm sorry, just kind of scrolling, but they also have license terms that you can add, to a license if, and we've talked about that with MCLS to try to make sure that those license terms are in there. another thing, there's also ebooks, right? So I don't know, we're not a member of HathiTrust. I don't know if other libraries are, but one of the things with HathiTrust is if you are a member, then you're people who have, people who are part of like your library, the community you serve can go to HathiTrust and get, might be able to get digital content that is under copyright, but that can be provided under Section 508. And so that's an option that some libraries take advantage of to make sure that there's access to a lot of this content. And I mean, we don't have to look at it, but I had looked at like EBSCO and ProQuest both have like this is interesting, like this EBSCO page for their ebook accessibility. And this is like because, it's really very detailed. It has, I'm gonna just scroll down a little, but there's all this information about how a screen reader works, how the screen readers will work. And one of the things that I know, that I found is that EBSCO actually makes it a selling point, right? So if you ask EBSCO, why should I buy your ebooks on your platform instead of say eBook Central? And eBook Central has a lot of description as well, but EBSCO is going to tell you that because they're better, that they're going to, not quite sure if they're doing this, but I know they've talked about like, well, they're not going to sell books that aren't compatible. They're not going to, and that's a question like for the vendors is, are you going to have content there that we can't, that then doesn't work with for our services. And sorry, hate it when people do that, so I'm doing that. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on that I know, and I couldn't really tell, that's one of the things that's hard to tell. The managing license, that's from an Alma help page, right? And we're actually not, and Deja will nod along, but at this point at Ferris, we're not putting our license information online the way that that we'd like to, maybe where people could see stuff. But this is an example of, for the Alma license terms, I mean, that's not very informative. But you can say whether there is an accessibility compliance indicator, and you can communicate that to users. I mean, that can come up in the A to Z list, or something that says, hey, here's some information. And of course, you can also put it as extra information in the license terms. Other systems might be more flexible, but that's the question of what are you going to tell users if they're trying to use some content and can't get to it? Are there accessibility issues that, or is it at least supposed to be complying or not? Mm-hmm. So that's something we're certainly looking at doing.
So Fran, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have not worked in the Alma BO to configure what is going to show up in your license terms yet? Because I know that's been something on my list for like 3 or 4 years. And when Barbara moved down from associate dean and became the collection strategist, this was like her top priority, which she never got to.
We haven't, and I know Deja really wants us to, and I think she's talked separately with the dean about different ways to do that, but no, we haven't. And
I was hired for that. That was my presentation topic for my interview, is how to build ERM. So we still are.
Anyway,
so
so
we'll get
and
there.
that's probably, and the thing is we could probably just sit down and do, some of them, the most common ones, pretty easily, because we're smaller than you guys are, although I know you're working on it. Never mind.
Yeah, we're working on it. We might be getting close.
Right. Well, anyway, and a lot of the stuff, the MCLS stuff should have that information. Anything we're getting from MCLS, it should all be really pretty easy to do. I don't know. It seems like, so no, we haven't. Did you, I mean, I always think of GVSU as kind of a, a leaders and stuff. Does Folio make it easier? Do you think?
I think Folio makes it easier than Cirrus Solutions did. I don't know. Right now, we're like, man, when we really get in there, we're going to fill all these fields out. We're going to do that. And, we'll see what reality actually is when time is at a premium and we have to go through all those licenses to fill out these fields. Right now, we're kind of thinking as licenses get updated, maybe we'll just do them then instead of retroactively going back, but we've not done anything yet.
Right. And so, yeah, that would be good anyway, since we all had one. And isn't that frustrating too? I mean, not, but that we went through that whole thing of like all buying Alma together or a bunch of libraries buying it together, but we haven't really been able to work together. I mean, that's the kind of thing that maybe we should be able to do together.
Absolutely.
But
I am totally dead set against using all of the license terms they have in there. I think at one point I saw like some kind of form that Barbara used to use as a checklist, and it might be an MCLS form. And I think that it would be good to put those license terms in or something similar, plus, maybe an accessibility or a DEI statement if that's needed, and use just that. But Alma is the way it is out of the box, it's just too much.
Yeah,
that was one of the things I brought up with my dean, because it's like you have to be able to read a license and you have to be able to, like, I don't think we need more than half a dozen, because I know the instructional librarian's like, well, we want to know what the copyright status is. And I'm like, okay, is it worth this amount of energy? Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
So
no, I mean, I think it's just like, there's the basic fields, and I mean, I don't think it would be that hard. So much that it does get kind of fraught, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take your conversation about accessibility off the rails. It's just, you brought this up and I was like, oh.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention one more thing anyway, and which was that, I mean, one of the other interesting questions that comes up is that, if something is born digital or very current, right? I mean, when you're doing, say, Science Direct or, Wiley journals, then it's just, there's no reason in the world for it not to be totally accessible and completely compliant. I mean but some stuff that we get, and I know, and there it comes down to that buying thing, because I know that there's challenges sometimes with some of like the ProQuest archives and some of the different things where people just scan them and then it's like, nobody can read this. And so I was kind of interested in, I mean, one of the things they have, I'm going to go back, I think, to like, one of the things they have at Michigan State is, and they have this on their library webpage about remediation requests. And, and basically just, I mean, that's a question like I was thinking, well, how do we do that? Just to make sure that people know that they can request an accessible copy if there's something that isn't. And we've done that like with Canopy, like we were really happy, right? With Canopy, well, you can request that they'll closed caption something, and I think it worked the first time so well that now we keep saying it'll work great, even though they're not nearly as fast anymore. But anyway, but that's an interesting question of, well, if it's not accessible, can you make it accessible in a way that allows people to have access to that content?
So is it your
wondering,
responsibility as the library to do that for your faculty that are using things in teaching?
I don't know.
Okay.
And does our disability studies office even know that that's an option? Because I don't see it sprawled across our library webpage of, hey, we can convert most things.
Well, anyway, actually, I'm going to say one more thing, and then Jeff, I bet, knows a lot more about this part of it than I do, which is just, I was also interested to notice that like EBSCO does also say, hey, we'll help with that if you have a problem. Something we're providing isn't accessible, we'll help with a remediation to make that content. So that is another thing to pay attention to. But like, I think that's a great segue to the question of what, you know, how it really works in terms of things may actually being accessible. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. Fine, there. Thanks. Thanks for the questions, Jerry. Too.
Hey, well, I will try to answer that as best I can. I know that at Grand Valley, if there is something that is found to be inaccessible, then it will end up being sent over to me, and my office will take care of that. So I'm going to do a screen share here as soon as I tab back into Zoom. Okay. There we go. Okay. Hang on. Sorry, folks. Technical difficulty here on my end.
I love it when the tech person always has technical difficulties.
It always happens. You know, you're using technology, you're just asking for trouble. It's the way I always look at it. So what I want to talk about is document accessibility and how to fix document accessibility problems. As I mentioned, at Grand Valley, if there's a document that's found to be inaccessible, that'll get sent over to Disability Support Resources, generally by the student, and then it'll be fixed. I will do the remediation on that. So I wanted to show you some of the tools that I use for that. We were unaware of issues in our own library until we had a student who was studying from abroad at Grand Valley 2014 through 2016. She was blind, and she was in the Master of Public Administration program. And she did graduate. She aced all her classes, but she did report some issues with some of our content. And the library was really attentive to that and was really been working ever since to ensure that the database systems were accessible and the content was accessible. And so there hasn't been as much remediation work. In fact, I haven't heard anything in the last year or so from any of the students. But we also only have a very small number of students who are blind or low vision. So I guess that isn't a real good measure of exactly, you know, how accessible things are, but I can say I haven't heard anything in terms of issues. So why do the documents? Yes, they do need to be usable by library patrons who use assistive technology. And the assistive technology that I'm thinking of here would be a screen reader. Something that would be used by someone who is blind or low vision. And there are some sample screen readers up in this slide. JAWS and NVDA are very popular for Windows. JAWS is commercial software and it's about $1,000 a seat. NVDA is free, and NVDA was developed by some of the original JAWS programmers. So just because it's free, don't think it's not good software. It really is. It works very well. It doesn't support as much third-party software, but it does work with documents. It works with the Windows operating system, Microsoft Office, Chrome, and Firefox. So in terms of library use, it would do the job. And I have both of those screen readers installed on our assistive technology workstations in our campus labs and libraries. For Macs, there's a screen reader called VoiceOver, and that's built right into Mac OS, and it's built right into Apple mobile devices, iPhone, iPad, it's already there. Chromevox will support the Chrome browser and Chromebooks, and that is also free. It just has to be added as a browser extension. And Android devices have a screen reader called TalkBack that can be installed and activated. The majority of the users that we support in my office are using text reading software, which is a little bit different from screen reading software. Screen readers are designed to read everything that's on the computer screen: application menus, icons, text, all the controls on a web page or within a document. And screen readers also allow someone to completely navigate a screen by the keyboard only. Whereas with a text reader, it's just designed to read text. So the level of accessibility is a little bit different. Screen readers require a higher level of accessibility than just a text reader. For a screen reader to be able to work with the library database or with a document, all the controls, all the links would have to be accessible. Whereas if somebody's just using text reading software, all that they're concerned about is the text of a document or a web page can be read and read in the correct order. Text reading software, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different applications that can be used. We're using Natural Reader at Grand Valley, at least that's what I start students with. Works very well, and it's also free software. I figure that students are spending enough money to be a student. They don't need to spend extra money on tools so that they can access their books and documents online. Natural Reader, however, Patrick, it's not available on those library or lab workstations. It doesn't work in the lab environment, so that's for students' personal computers. So if you go looking at the assistive text stations, you won't find Natural Reader there. So in a perfect world, I think we all know all database content and controls would be screen reader accessible. Web documents would all read properly. PDF documents would all read properly. They would have the tags in the background that describe heading levels, paragraph levels, tables, images, accessible EPUB format would be used. And of course, we know we don't live in a perfect world. And so the reality is that many documents aren't accessible. You might run into databases that have image-only PDFs, something that was simply scanned. This is more of an issue for us with Blackboard documents in our LMS, although we have a plugin that takes care of that for us now. But up to a couple of years ago, I used to get hundreds of documents sent to me by students because their faculty wanted them to read these scanned images. And if you have a scanned image, all you have is a picture of text. You don't have any real text. Hopefully library databases aren't using image-only PDFs, but I suppose the potential is there, especially with very old content. There could also be PDF documents that aren't properly tagged, and I'll get into just a wee little bit about what tagging is later, but tags are metadata that, like I said, describe heading levels, standard paragraph text, tables, data cells versus header cells, and things like that. Or maybe the database system might be all web-based, but the HTML isn't written properly. It isn't written to be accessible, and documents simply don't read properly. That happens, unfortunately. When our international student was working with some of the databases back in 2014, 2015, early 2016, we identified a couple of databases where the controls, the links that a student would use to navigate weren't screen reader accessible. And I know the library was very interested to hear about those, and I think those things got taken care of. So most of what I have to deal with in my office is with document remediation. So if there's an article that's available to a student and it's as a PDF document or some other type of document, then I work with those and I use some tools to fix things. And at a minimum, the text needs to be readable and readable in the proper order. And I'll show you some examples where things aren't necessarily read in a proper order, and I'll show you how I can fix those things. Images need to be also described with an alternative text description, because if you have an image in a document, a screen reader will either pass over it completely or it'll just say image. And then the screen reader user has no idea what that image was and how meaningful it was. So the rule on that is if there is any image that adds meaning to a document, the image needs to have a description. Alternative text is invisible text. It's not something that's visible to a sighted user, but it's something that a screen reader can read out loud. And there are tools that exist that we can use to fix problems in documents. And what we end up doing is using a process called optical character recognition, or OCR software, to create a brand new document that can be read out loud, because that's honestly the easiest way to fix most of these accessibility problems. There is also a website that can do a pretty decent job of creating a readable document in many cases, and it's completely free to use. It's called onlineocr.net. And I'll show you that too. That's a site where a user can upload a document, and the site will run optical character recognition and return a document to the user that can at least be read out loud. It may not be a properly tagged PDF. We're not so worried about that. We just want something that can be read out loud to somebody that needs to hear the text. It won't be able to add alternative text descriptions, but again, we're concerned right now with getting content that is readable. And it's a free tool, so it's definitely worth a try. Whoops, so here's where I go into demonstrations. And so I'm going to stop my screen share here, and I'm going to bring something else up, and I'm going to go back into the screen share. Okay, so that's not what I wanted to share. So now I got to stop it, do a new share. And what I wanted to share was, now I know you just want to go out and read this for yourself. Investigating algae for CO2 capture and accumulation for simultaneous production of biomass for biodiesel production. This is something that I found actually at our library. I went hunting pretending I was a first-year biology student and looking for something on photosynthesis. This can be read out loud very nicely. This is this article in a web page format. Web pages are typically a safer bet than PDF documents. PDF documents can have all sorts of issues that affect readability. I am going to just go and share my entire screen, so I don't have to keep bouncing around here between applications. So here is the article, and the software that I am going to use to read this is something called Natural Reader, just to give you a little taste of what it is to use a text reading program. So Natural Reader can operate either as a application where I can load a document in and have it read out loud, or I can switch it into a mini board, which is this floating toolbar, which is really handy for working with documents and web pages, especially if I'm a sighted user who just wants to have text read out loud. And I can go in and select text and click play.
Investigating technology for CO2 capture and accumulation and simultaneous production of biomass for biodiesel production. Investigate.
And then I can go down to another chunk and have this read.
Carbon capture and sequestration technologies are used to reduce carbon emissions. Membranes, solvents, and adsorbents are the three major methods of CO2 capture.
Okay, you're able to hear that okay, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so that works nicely. The web page reads and it reads the way it's supposed to. I also have the option of downloading the PDF of this particular document, and the PDF was in some ways pretty impressive. It came with bookmarks, which let me navigate to the different sections. So I thought that was kind of nice. And I was hoping that if someone had taken all the time to put bookmarks in, that this would be a nice accessible PDF. Unfortunately, this one was not. So let's shift a little bit back to a screen reader user and how screen readers work. If I was a student or library patron, I don't have to be a student to be using the library. I'm a library patron. I am a screen reader user, and I'm going to use NVDA to read through this document. The way a screen reader will work, if I'm working with a PDF document, is it will look behind the scenes of a PDF document, and it will look for these structures called tags. If there is something in the tags tree, it will read everything in the tags tree and it'll ignore everything else. Well, we have a little bit of a problem because the only thing that is in the tags tree is images. There's no text in this tags tree at all. It's just the images. So all I'm going to hear is figure, and then whatever the alternative text is for that figure, and that's not going to help me. So this document would need some remediation work if the student were using strictly the PDF. Fortunately, there's a web version of this, and that'll work much better. And that's what students are probably more apt to use anyway. But with the PDF, I could run into some problems. Other issues that you can run into for PDF. This one I'm sure gets your attention, the gene for pyruvate oxophosphate dikinase. Makes you want to go out and get a subscription to this thing. So anyway, if I were using a text reader with this, and I was using Natural Reader, I could highlight the text.
The gene for pyruvate orthophosphate dikinase in C4 plants. Structure, regulation, and evolution.
So that works nicely.
The gene for pyruvate orthophosphate.
But when I get down here, and unfortunately, this is another common problem with PDFs. Look what happens when I try to highlight a paragraph. So this document's going to need some reworking, remediation work, because I can't highlight what I want. And what's going to happen is it's going to read straight across the page. It's not going to read column by column.
Pyruvate. Orthophosphate dikinase catalyzes the reversian acid metabolism.
See, it goes right across from here to here. So we have some tools that we can use to fix this. Other issues that you could get. This did not come from the library. This is actually a book that I requested from a textbook publisher for a student that has a disability and they use text reading software. This, I was surprised in this day and age to be sent an image-only PDF document that has absolutely no text in it whatsoever. But that's what the publisher sent. So we had to process that into something that could be read. So the tools that we use.
Jeff?
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat and it's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It just popped up. I know you're sharing your screen, so you can't see. How does JAWS or NVDA read the PDF that has the 2-column design?
Well, ideally, what it would do is it would read in 2 columns. It should understand that, but because of the structure of this PDF document, it's not going to do it. It's going to read the same way you saw a Natural Reader reading. It's going to go right across the page. So that's one that has to be remediated. This particular PDF, by the way, I should have pointed out, has no tags. And so if there are no tags in a PDF, what should happen is the screen reader would read left to right, top to bottom, and would hopefully figure out that there's 2 columns here. But because of the way this PDF is constructed, it's not communicated to any software that there are two columns here. So this one requires remediation to work with either text reader like Natural Reader or a screen reader like JAWS or NVDA or VoiceOver or any others. So here's what we do. I mentioned the free service, onlineocr.net. That's something that users can try. We have some more robust tools available to us at Grand Valley. And the tools that we use, you may have heard of Kurzweil 3000. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. It's actually a pretty well-known program developed by Ray Kurzweil, who really helped out the blind community way back in the 1970s by making those reading machines, basically a scanner where you could put a book or a periodical or a newspaper on, push a button and it would scan the page and read it out loud. He developed software that could do the same thing. So Kurzweil 3000 is pretty well known. Now, we don't have that. We have its competitor, and it's something called WinWizard, which stands for What You Need Now, which sounds kind of cheesy, actually, if you ask me, but that's what they named it. It works really, really well. It does everything that Kurzweil will do, and it does it for a lot less money. Students can buy this software for $200 instead of closer to $1,000. And so with that student pricing, we like it if students choose that they want to go and purchase it on their own. Question? You have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious if there was like some sort of subsidization for that. I mean, I'd like to assume there is, but that sounds like a lot of money just to be compliant or be able to live.
$200 is kind of expensive. It's cheaper than the $1,000 price that students would pay for Kurzweil. What a lot of schools do is they can purchase a web license for Kurzweil or for another competing product such as Read and Write Gold. That's another big player in this document remediation space. And the schools can purchase a subscription and they can make the software available to everybody. If all their students, they could make it available to all their faculty and staff. It's not something that we've heavily considered. I've looked around at the possibility of that, but we also have to balance other needs versus how much would students use this? How much of a need is there, because so many of the documents that students are using are actually coming out of Blackboard. We have a tool in Blackboard called Blackboard Ally, which does an amazing job of remediating the content out of Blackboard. It also works in Canvas, I think, because I think Blackboard owns Canvas, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a great plugin. Of course, it doesn't help library databases very much, but it does take care of our Blackboard needs. But getting back to how these tools work, what they do is they load a document in and they run a process called optical character recognition, where every letter that is seen here is analyzed and a new document is created based on what the software thinks it sees. And the advantage of a program like Win or Kurzweil is that there's tools to manipulate columns where I can redirect and create reading zones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how WinWizard works. On a computer where WinWizard is installed, there is a virtual printer that's added. It has a funny sounding name. It's called the Freedom Import Printer. And the reason for that is the software is made by Freedom Scientific, so they have to put their own name on it. And it's an import printer, which means it doesn't print out onto paper, it prints into a piece of software. So this is Freedom Scientific's virtual printer to direct content into their software. I wish they had a better name for it, but that's what they call it. So I pretend I'm printing it, but I'm really sending it into WinWizard. And WinWizard is going to pop up on my computer. and I have to sign in. I
Jeff
can be anybody. I mean, if a student was using this in the lab and they wanted to maintain confidentiality, they could be Bugs Bunny or Elmer Fudd or anybody they wanted to be.
Okay.
And then the software goes to work. It imports each page as an image. It analyzes what it thinks it sees. It sometimes gets it right and it sometimes doesn't, but don't worry about that because there are some tools in here that let me fix things. So what I have to do is wait until it processes all of the pages. Question? Oh, I saw a hand up. I wasn't sure if that was a question or not. So it's still got 5 unprocessed pages. So we've got to wait for that to go down to 0. We're at 4. And it's not, in this document, it's not getting everything right the way I would want it to. So I know I'm going to have to do a little bit more work with this. Sometimes, if I have a really clean document, for example, if I was working with chapter 2 of this book called 3 by Annie Dillard, this one I know for a fact would process very quickly and very accurately. It's just the way it is because I already did this one. I could do this real quick and easy. Win is taking its time with this more complicated document, probably because of the columns and because this is a scientific article, there's going to be charts, graphs, tables, and figures, and it has to try and do something with those. And now we're down to 0 unprocessed images. So we have text that could be read out loud.
Plant cell physio 36.6.9.3.
Go to the title.
The gene preparedness or the phosphate deconation.
It doesn't always pronounce scientific words correctly, and we can fix some of that. But I see some gibberish in here, and I don't know what this was, and I need to go in and investigate this a little bit more. What Win does, there's actually 2 views of every page in here. There is an exact view, which looks just like the original source file, in this case, that PDF, and there is a text view. There is a tool called dynamic zoning. And what this does is it lets me go in and re-recognize zones and actually direct the reading. So I can take care of this issue where here in this document, I'll bet you it would read, catalyzes the and go over here and start reading straight across. I can fix that with this particular tool. What I have to do is go over here and I have to redefine the zones. So I'm going to go in, do this, and just set the reading order. The order that I draw these zones in is going to be the order that the document will be read. And I know that this down here, like footnotes, and the text continues up here. My Zoom window is hiding some of the text, so I don't know if I caught everything. I tried. And then I can go down here and lastly get that. And then I just tell it to reprocess, and it'll reprocess that particular page. And that will take care of the majority. Close the tool. It got rid of the gibberish because it helped it with the reading zones. It didn't get rid of everything. But let's go down to right here. We're hoping that it reads dikinase catalyzes the reversible photophosphorylation. Let's see.
Dikinase catalyzes the reversible phosphorylation.
They got it. So what that tool did was it let me tell the software I have a 2-column document here, and there's zones with single page or single column, there's zones with 2 columns. So that was the amount of time it would take to fix that 1 page, and then I'd have to go through all 6 or 7 pages of this document and reset the reading zones for every one. which, yeah, it gets to be a lot of work. When Grand Valley invested in Blackboard Ally, which really helped us with all that Blackboard content, I stopped getting dozens to, many of these documents from Blackboard every week. That I had from students that I had to fix. When we had the student who was a screen reader user run into some issues with library documents from the databases, I would do this with those documents. I would process the documents. Fortunately, it seems that a lot of the databases are now using web content instead of PDF documents. So that's a major step forward with accessibility.
Jeff, we have another question.
Okay.
Have electronic textbooks helped with these issues? In the early 2000s, they read a textbook. Someone read textbooks onto cassettes for blind students, and that was pretty challenging with all the punctuation, formulas, notes, etc.
Yeah, I used to do that when I was a student worker here at Grand Valley. I always got stuck with the philosophy books or computer science, where you had to read out code character by character, and that was really tedious. Publishers now make their content available to disability services offices. So if I needed a textbook from, say, Pearson or McGraw-Hill or Cengage Learning, I have ways to contact the publishers, or actually there's a clearinghouse at Georgia Tech where the big publishers supply their content, and I just get it from that clearinghouse. Makes a huge difference. In the past couple of years, there's been a dramatic increase in the accessibility level of those files. Even 10 years ago, the majority of those books had to be processed using WinWizard, and we use student workers in our office to do that. The reason being is that the reading order was not correct. Almost invariably, textbooks came in with each page had 2 columns of text, and the way the pages were set up, it would read, the text reading software would read the right-hand column, and then it would read the left-hand column. It was backwards. And we had to process everything with WinWizard to fix that. And I'm seeing that those issues don't exist in most cases now with textbooks.
This has been really interesting. I didn't realize how much, this could get really time intensive for you guys. So this is interesting. We do have 2 minutes left. So if there's questions, I don't mean to cut you off, Jeff, but if there are questions, now's the time to get them out.
I have a question, but it's a little bit of a pivot from this. So if someone has like an accessibility question.
Okay.
I was thinking about this in terms of audio searching with all of our spy devices, Siri, Alexa, whatever else is running around these days. And I'm wondering how that, like being able to voice search, if it's the same sort of tagging. Anyway, sorry, I know nothing, but.
I imagine it would be the same issue if it's got bad metadata or not good. If it's got bad data on that document, you're not going to find it in a voice search, right?
Right. That makes sense. There's my contact info if you have questions that come up later, or if you want to get in touch with me for some reason.
Bronte snuck in and wants a link to the clearinghouse in Georgia.
That is accesstext.org. Many textbook publishers provide their content to Access Text. And another location where we find a lot of books is at bookshare.org. That is a membership-only organization. Students must have a qualifying disability, and then they can access electronic copies of their books on the Bookshare website. And a lot of publishers make their content available there, and everything is accessible. Nothing has to be remediated, which is awesome. And as a perk to the students, because Bookshare, for the average person who has a disability, there's a cost to using it, $50 a year, and it's funded by a Department of Ed grant. Publishers and authors get their royalties that way. So that means that the students do not have to purchase a copy of the book first. They can get their content directly from Bookshare. It can save a lot of money.
All right, so gone are the dark days of reading formulas into tape recorders.
Absolutely. I don't like
Skip
those
down
days. I
footnote.
remember them too well.
Colon ding, comma ding.
Well, this was very informative to me. So Fran and Jeff, thank you very much for presenting. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
I'll feel, if you continue to find these PDFs that are issues, please send them to me so we can yell at vendors, because I do enjoy that.
Okay.
And if no one else has anything, we're at time. So I'd like everyone to get on with their day. It's 4 o'clock. I'm sure people have stuff to do before they sign out for the day.
True
Thank you
that.
both.
Oh, go ahead, Frank. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you. This was really informative and timely.
Thank you, Fran and Jeff. Really appreciate it.
And
Thanks.
thank you. And thank you,
Yeah,
Kathy,
neat
for
stuff.
asking me to do this.
Thanks for doing it.
Great to see everybody too.
Yeah, everyone have a good week. And Leanne and I will send out an email about about next month's topic here and get in touch with. Sounds like you're presenting next month, Jerry.
Yeah,
So we'll reach out to you and make sure everything's planned and set to go.
okay. I'll try to do the same.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks.
You as well. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.